Thank you for joining. Appreciate your interest in our coffee break webinar series. Today, Matt Greenwald and I are talking about an interesting finding that we've uncovered in our retiree insights data. So we've titled it When the Sum of the Parts is Actually Bigger Than the Whole, which will kind of become clear what we're talking about in a minute, but relating to how we think about the length of retirement, how we ask about it, and how that can impact kind of what we hear from people. So some interesting data that has a very kind of specific angle here. So I want to kind of start off the conversation with just kind of an explanation of where this data comes from. It's from our Retiree Insights program. It's a long-running annual multi-sponsor retirement project that Matt Greenwald and I lead up. Basically trying to uncover insights related to investment planning issues, the needs of pre-retirees, retirees, and definitely the financial professionals who serve them. So we every year undertake surveys of financial professionals as well as consumers, and then follow it up with focus groups with all of these audiences, trying to every year learn more about kind of the various topics that fall into the planning and kind of income considerations of these retirees and how financial professionals are thinking about it. So this data that we're going to look at is just a small snippet from what is a pretty extensive project every year, um, but wanted to kind of find something interesting to highlight today to talk about it. So as part of that, want to thank, of course, all the Retiree Insight sponsors from 2024 for making this possible. Can talk a little bit at the end. 2025 is just beginning to ramp up, which we're excited about. And what we're talking about today will also be one of the things that we continue to investigate and try to learn more about. All right, so let's start with kind of what touched off this kind of idea for us, which is how long do people expect to live in retirement? So when you ask consumers, and this is from our Retiree Insights data, to estimate how long their retirement will last, but importantly, in different stages. So if you're thinking about early retirement, middle retirement, late retirement, how long are each of these phases going to last? We don't define what early retirement looks like, what middle retirement should be for you. We just wanted to have them go through the exercise of thinking about the length of retirement in phases. And here's what you get. On average, 12 years in early retirement, 11 and a half to 12 years in middle retirement, and almost 11 years in late retirement is the average of what consumers, again, pre-retirees and retirees, are expecting to spend in retirement. So if you take all of that and add it up, almost 35 years of retirement is what consumers told us this year they're expecting to experience, which if you've kind of dabbled in kind of thinking about longevity and trying to get consumers to take serious the idea that a long retirement could be in front of you, um, could be encouraging. This is, a very lengthy retirement that is kind of on average, again, what people are expecting. But it's interesting to kind of think about how people are assessing these early, middle, and late retirement phases to come up with this lengthy overall period. Maybe more surprisingly, but I think it adds to what made us want to investigate this more, is that we asked this in 2020 and saw a pretty different story. Again, it was a lengthy retirement overall that people were expecting, but for every phase, we've seen kind of longer expectations from 2020 to 2024. So just 4 years. The overall length of what people are saying they're expecting has gone up over 8 years, and it's kind of coming from all phases, but maybe especially the late retirement, where there's almost 3.5 years of a longer expected retirement. So we see this kind of lengthy expectation this year, but also a big shift just in 4 years. And so, of course, there's different reasons that this could be the case. If we're thinking about longevity, the most obvious kind of place that we kind of expect there to be a difference is that maybe people are expecting to live longer, but that's not the only equation for retirement, of course. So one, maybe consumers are expecting to retire early now. So if they're retiring earlier, they have to kind of build in more years for all of these phases that could be under consideration. Number two is the other side of the equation that I mentioned. You know, if longevity is increasing, maybe people are expecting to live longer, and that's why we're seeing this difference. And then three, which I think is pretty compelling, 2020, and when we fielded the survey was June in 2020, was the very height of the pandemic. Maybe even hard to look back and think about how we were imagining the world back then. But there's a very strong possibility that 2020 pandemic influence changing the way that we're thinking, not just about retirement, but a lot of things, longevity, when you're going to retire, how you're envisioning what this retirement's going to look like. Very possible that what we're seeing is not kind of a trend year over year, but a difference between 2020 versus kind of now, kind of pulled out of the pandemic, thinking about what retirement is going to look like for consumers these days. So what is the answer? Well, we have some insight into kind of what is not the answer, maybe. So I think that's the starting point for thinking about this. So it's not the first two options of kind of shifting timelines for when people think they're going to retire, how long they think they're going to live. So starting with retirement age, we actually ask this separately. So if you're retired, we ask people, when did you retire? What age were you? If you are not yet retired, we're asking people to project when they think they're likely to retire. So if we plot this out, 2024 versus 2020, almost zero difference, right? As much as we kind of have thought about changing kind of perspectives on retirement in the pandemic and coming out of it, um, it has not shifted hardly at all from 2020 to 2024 when people think they're going to retire. And it's also not a change in life expectancy. So we also asked people, how long do you think you're going to live? And as difficult that is as that is for some people to kind of grapple with, and we have a lot of people in the survey who say that they don't know, they can't guess, or they don't want to guess. Um, when we look at the people's average answers about how old they think they're going to live to, very little change in this as well. So 85.6, 85.7 is the average for 2024 and 2020. So the first two, as you can tell, when we ask it separately, kind of on their own, thinking about how old am I going to live? What's the average life expectancy? Um, when am I going to retire? What's the date that I've been planning towards? These things have not shifted in the last 4 years, like we've seen in the phases. And so if we take the calculated average, so this is not just subtracting across the bar graphs here, but if we calculate the average the average length of retirement based on these two metrics. So when people tell us how old they're going to be or they live to and what age that they expect to retire to, and then calculate the average length of retirement, you can see this has shifted almost zero across the two time frames that we're looking at. So again, there's a very different thing going on when, depending on how we ask these questions, and the phases of retirement seems to be triggering a much different response than we get by asking, how old are you going to live to, and at what age do you think you're going to retire? So we're seeing something different with phases. We're seeing longer estimates overall, in retirement, 35 years this year versus 23 years. If you're calculating it based on those two um, estimates that we just looked at on the previous slide. So a different length of retirement based on how you ask it. We also have seen estimates that changed over the past 4 years versus estimates that are extremely stable over the past 4 years. So the phases results in kind of a less stable, maybe more open to interpretation, or kind of the mood that the people are answering the survey in shifts how people think about how long they're going to spend. And the longer estimates part, I think actually is interestingly makes sense with what behavioral psychology has to say about very similar things. For example, processing memories, we think about in a very similar way. We attribute longer duration to memories when they contain more sub-events and more sub-events that are dissimilar. And you can see this 2015 journal article for more kind of information about that. But if you're thinking about a memory and it has various phases as part of that memory, and those phases are very dissimilar from each other, you're going to think about that memory taking longer than you would otherwise. So it's not a huge leap to kind of project this to how we think about the future. Maybe if there's more sub-events, retirement phases in the future, and we see those as very different. And I think people see early retirement as very different from late retirement, for example. It makes sense that we would attribute longer time horizon to what retirement is going to last, how retirement's going to last for us. So I think this is an interesting idea on itself, just kind of thinking about how people make sense of retirement, how people make sense of time. But why is this interesting? Why should we be thinking about it in the retirement industry? What should planners and what should financial companies think about when we're looking at this? Well, one thing is that retirement can come sooner than expected. So having a conservative estimate of the length of retirement may actually make a lot of sense. So in Retiree Insights, 51% of retirees say they retired earlier than they expected. 51% retire early. And that's not a blip. We've seen this in other studies going back in the 90s. This is kind of a constant phenomenon of how people expect retirement is going to come. And then when it does, many people have now gone into retirement earlier than they had planned to. Of those who retire early, 53% say they completed fewer retirement planning tasks as a result. Makes perfect sense. You're retiring earlier than planned, and for a lot of people, the last couple years is where a lot of really sincere planning gets done. So if you retire early, you're going to plan less. And on the flip side, financial professionals basically echo this idea. 68% of the financial professionals we surveyed regret not starting planning earlier with some clients. So why does this matter? Well, planning matters for a successful retirement. And if you're kind of underestimating how long retirement's going to be, you may not be factoring in the possibility of an early retirement. It's also the case that life expectancy, so the other kind of component here, is often misunderstood. It's not easy to think about in the first place, as I already mentioned. It's kind of a difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around or even want to think about. And in our survey, 1 in 6 could not guess at life expectancy, even though they could guess at a lot of things that we asked about. It's also the case that many view it as an estimate of how long they will live, period, kind of like the upper bounds of it, when in fact, half will live longer than kind of the average expectancy. So in the same way that it may be prudent to think about retiring earlier than you expect, it may also be very sensible to think about the possibility of living a longer time horizon than you would otherwise, just kind of considering a, for many people, very stable life expectancy estimate. And then lastly, and I'll turn it over to Matt for some commentary here. Thinking about phases makes consumers place more emphasis on late retirement and especially late retirement expenses. So not only did we ask consumers about all of this, but we asked financial professionals to kind of give us their estimate of what their clients experience. What does the average kind of retirement stages look like for their clients in terms of estimated length? And then where do people's savings go to? What phases get what percent of your overall pool of money? So on the left, you can see the anticipated length of retirement stages. The light blue is the consumer numbers that we've already been looking at. The green is financial professionals. And you can see they're not totally off the mark for what consumers think, but they do expect a shorter late retirement than what consumers are estimating. And if you look at where people's savings are expected to go, financial professionals and consumers are very much aligned in early and middle retirement. They're thinking about a quarter to 25, 27%-ish of their savings will get spent in each of these phases. But then there's this big gap in what financial professionals think their clients are going to spend in late retirement versus what consumers think. And the difference there is going to kind of savings that's left over, left to family, that kind of thing. But it's basically attributed to consumers are expecting this longer retirement, and they're therefore thinking about all the costs that are going to be kind of coming at them in that late retirement and for a longer period of time. So there's a kind of implications for how we think about expenses here. All right, Matt, I will turn it over to you for some thoughts about kind of what else does this mean and kind of what we should be thinking about and taking away from this.
Thank you very much. And good morning. It's nice to see so many old friends attending and some new people we haven't interacted with before. I think it's important to put these findings into context. There's evidence that retirement has changed. It's less of a continuous single stage marked by a slow decline from go-go to slow-go to no-go. I think increasingly it's more marked by at least two very distinct changes. In the first stage, it's for fewer people just to search for leisure and more for a search for meaning. Several years ago, or even decades ago, we asked people, Greenwald Research, we asked retirees, what's the best thing about retirement? And very often heard things like, every day is Saturday, the alarm clock never goes off. And now we're hearing more people working, the labor force participation of older people, after declining steadily for 4 decades from the end of World War II to the mid-'80s, started turning up again. Volunteering after retirement is up. The search for involvement is going up. Now more people, want the alarm clock to go off so they can do something meaningful. Financial services companies, retirement companies, in their literature, very often showed a couple older people wandering aimlessly down the beach because that's what their understanding of the ideal retirement. And now fewer people want that and more people want to do something. And by the way, this also provides benefits. There's evidence that when retired people retire and every day is Saturday and the alarm clock goes off, lose cognitive functioning and have a higher incidence of depression. If people find meaning, their cognitive functioning in some cases can increase, and there's avoidance depression. Interesting article on that today in the New York Times. The first stage, more of a search for meaning, more involvement. The last stage, now longer, with more time spent in ill health. We've succeeded in keeping healthy people old enough to get sick and keep people alive longer. And I think it's also, with this, there's also more variation in spending patterns in each stage. Some older people, healthy, stay at home and live basically on Social Security. And some older people move to a nursing home and spend their children's inheritances. I think that with more distinct stages of retirement, in some ways, to an extent, redefining retirement, there's a greater need to prepare separately for each stage. But as we think about preparing for each stage, I think we have to acknowledge it's very hard to plan for the last stage of retirement. It's just, as Doug sort of intimated, it's just psychologically hard to think about one in the declining years or with the end nearer. And it's also, I think, interesting that consumers expect a longer lasting last stage and higher spending than financial professionals do. They have some anxiety about this that might be turned into a greater effort at planning. Again, wider range of spending depending upon health and need for care in older ages. Doug, if you can go on to the next page, please. I think this research also reveals the value of planning for each stage. As we indicated, it may lead people to plan for a longer retirement, which is prudent. As Doug indicated, retirement can be longer than many people think, because many people started earlier. And also because with more time spent in ill health, I've seen something that said maybe 10 years in ill health, the cost later in life that may not even be anticipated with people's expecting higher spending may go up. And it could also increase even further in the future as we're even better at keeping unhealthy people alive longer. And also as we develop more and more attractive housing designed for people in old age. In my neighborhood, a new senior housing is being built. You put in $1 million and pay $5,000 a month. Has great services, highly attractive. You have to save up a certain amount of money to afford that. My mother-in-law spent her last years in an assisted living facility run by Hyatt. Very nice, all kinds of services, very expensive. There's going to be more of that. Attractive things for older people that will cost money. I think that when we think about how to plan for a redefined retirement that has more distinct stages, there are some key issues. I'll just raise a couple. Is it better to plan for 2 stages, more simplicity, or 3, more precision, and leading to a longer planning period? How should we describe the stages during the retirement planning process? And help them think and plan for it most effectively. And again, how do we do a better job of helping people prepare for the final stage? I think there's with a range of spending, there's more risk. And how will people assess how much to self-insure and how much risk to transfer to an insurance company? And there's a number of other challenges too. But as we think about more distinct stages of retirement, we have to address those issues. And with that, I turn it back to Doug.
Thanks, Matt. So I wanted to leave room for questions and comments if there are any. You could put them in chat, or you could feel free to unmute and ask them if anything occurs to you. I think this is an interesting topic that we're kind of continuing to investigate in the Retiree Insights program, and curious if there's any reactions to it or thoughts about what this could mean, what we were thinking in 2020 and what's going on with the numbers there, or the idea of thinking about phases of retirement and whether we should be envisioning 2 or 3, or what's a good way to make people plan properly.
I think we anticipated and answered every question.
I know. I think so. I think that's the case. All right. Well, wanted to end in that case with a couple of notes. One is that I've already mentioned. This is part of our Retiree Insights program. This data is from the 2024 program. The 2025 is just now kicking off. It's not too late to be a part of it if you're interested. We don't just tackle the singular kind of topic of retirement length and planning. We also get an assessment of kind of what people think about the environment that we're in now from investing and savings standpoint, strategies for saving, planning, taking retirement income, how AI and other technology is changing the way, playing a role now, but also changing the way that financial advice is delivered, how shifts in the nature of work and the transition to retirement are changing, and what financial professionals need to better serve pre-retirees and retiree clients. Um, so if you're interested in this, please reach out. The link for Retiree Insights is down at the bottom. But we can also kind of help answer any questions that you have if you want to reach out about it. Want to thank you all for attending. We have videos for every coffee break webinar available on our website. You can follow the greenwald.com coffee break link that's here. It's also on our YouTube page if you want to reach out and view some of the other videos that we've put out over the years. Please also connect with us on LinkedIn or visit our website to see more about what we're doing this year. And then one thing I wanted to highlight before we take off is that, as you can see, maybe in the corner of Matt and I's little video screens, we have a logo for the 40th anniversary of Greenwald, which 2025 represents 40 years of doing research and coming up with insights like the one that you've seen today. So be on the lookout, not just for kind of special notes about the 40th anniversary, but we're putting out lots of content related to it and kind of events that will celebrate and highlight the 40 years of research that we've gone down. So thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Feel free to reach out by email if you have questions that come up, and hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
I'd like to add my thanks as well. Thanks for attending.